Hello students, welcome to Tobin team. Today we will be learning about direct and indirect speech, which is very important in English grammar. Direct speech is the exact words spoken by a person, while indirect speech is the rephrased version of those words. For example, if someone says, I am happy, that's a direct speech. And if we rephrase it to, he said that he was happy, that's indirect speech. Let's understand in detail. Direct speech is known as quoted speech. It is the exact words spoken by a person and is enclosed in quotation marks. For example, she said, comma, in quotation, I love ice cream. That's she said, I love ice cream. When using indirect speech, it's important to remember a few rules. Always start with capital letter. Next is use quotation marks to show the exact words spoken. Then use a comma to separate the spoken words from the rest of the sentence. Now let's see the indirect speech. Indirect speech, on the other hand, is also known as reported speech. It is the rephrased version of the exact words spoken by a person. For example, she said that she loved ice cream. So when using indirect speech, it's important to remember a few rules. Use a reporting verb such as said, told, asked, etc. to introduce the speech. Change the tense of the reported speech based on the reporting verb's tense. And use pronouns to replace the name of the speaker and any other relevant pronouns. Next is remove quotation marks. Now let's take a deeper look at those rules. Reporting verb. Let's see what a reporting verb is. A reporting verb is used to introduce the indirect speech. Some common reporting verbs include said, told, asked, and so on. The tense of reporting verb will determine the tense of the indirect speech. For example, present tense reporting verb she says I love ice cream is that she says that she loves ice cream. I'll say it again. The present tense of the reporting verb she says I love ice cream is she says that she loves ice cream. Past tense reporting verb of this is of the sentence she said I love ice cream is that she said that she loved ice cream. Now let's look at the second point, that is changing tense. When changing from direct speech to indirect speech, the tense of the reported speech changes. That is, present simple becomes past simple. Present continuous becomes past continuous when converting. I'm saying about when converting the rules that we have to take care. Present simple becomes past simple. Present continuous becomes past continuous. Present perfect becomes past perfect. Past simple becomes past perfect. Past continuous becomes past perfect continuous. Future simple becomes conditional. That is would plus base verb. For example, direct speech is I'm studying for my exam is present continuous. So the indirect speech for this sentence would be she said that she was studying for her exam. So the present continuous became past continuous. Now let's look at the next point, that is using pronouns. When using indirect speech, we use pronouns to replace the name of the speaker and any other relevant pronouns. For example, direct speech. John said, I'm going to the store. The indirect speech of the sentence would be John said that he was going to the store. That is, first person singular became third person singular in the indirect speech. Now next point we have to take care is removing quotation marks. We have to remove quotation marks when using indirect speech, but there will be quotation marks in direct speech. Okay, direct speech, we'll write direct speech like in quotation, I want to go to the beach, comma, close quotation mark, said Tom. The indirect speech of this sentence, we have to write the indirect sentence by removing the quotation marks like Tom said that he wanted to go to the beach. Now next direct speech, an example for the direct speech is I have been waiting for an hour, she said. and I have been waiting for an hour will be in quotation marks. And the indirect speech of the sentence would be she said that she had been waiting for an hour. And direct speech, another example for a direct speech is we will be late in quotation, close quotation, they said. The indirect speech of the sentence would be without quotation marks, they said that they would be late. Direct and indirect speech are important components of English grammar. Remember to use quotation marks for direct speech and a reporting verb, changing tense and pronouns for indirect speech. Practice makes perfect, so keep practicing. After learning all this, you will become master of it. Okay. Now let's look at few more additional points regarding direct and indirect speech. First is punctuation. It's important to remember that when using direct speech, punctuation is included within quotation marks. For example, she said, comma, in quotation, I love ice cream, full stop, close quotation. Okay, so it's important to remember that when using direct speech, punctuation is included within the quotation marks. However, when using indirect speech, punctuation is placed outside the quotation marks. For example, she said that she loved ice cream, full stop. Okay, that's about punctuation. Now let's look at back shifting. When reporting statements, the verb tense in indirect speech is usually shifted back one tense from the tense in direct speech. However, this is not always the case when reporting commands or requests. For example, direct speech, please pass the salt, full stop, that sentence is in quotation. In indirect speech, this would be, she asked me to pass the salt. Next point is reporting verbs. Different reporting verbs can be used to convey different meanings or attitudes towards the speech being reported. For example, direct speech, I will be there. Indirect speech using said, she said that she would be there. Indirect speech using promised, she promised that she would be there. Now let's look at conditional statements. When reporting conditional statements, the verb tense in indirect speech changes according to the following rules. The present symbol in direct speech becomes past symbol in indirect speech. The past symbol in direct speech becomes past perfect in indirect speech. Past continuous and past perfect in direct speech becomes the past continuous and past perfect in indirect speech. For example, if I have time, I will help you. This is direct speech, and indirect speech would be, she said that if she had time, she would help me. Now let's look at another point, that is indirect questions. Indirect questions are questions that are reported without using a question mark. In direct speech, they are introduced by a reporting verb and end with a full stop. For example, direct speech, what time is it? And the indirect speech, she asked me what time it was. Another point regarding direct and indirect speech is the reported speech in the present tense. Sometimes we use reported speech in present tense to convey a general truth or fact that remains true. For example, direct speech, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. In direct speech, she says that water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. Next is modal verbs. When reporting modal verbs such as could, may, must, might, should, would, we use the corresponding past tense forms in indirect speech. For example, direct speech, I can swim. Indirect speech, she said that she could swim. Another point is indirect speech with questions. When reporting a question in indirect speech, we use the word if or whether to introduce the indirect question. For example, direct speech, are you coming to the party? Indirect speech, she asked me if or whether I was coming to the party. Next point is indirect speech with imperatives. When reporting an imperative sentence, a command or request, we use the word to or not to introduce the indirect speech. For example, direct speech, open the window. Indirect speech, she told me to open the window. Indirect speech with exclamations. When reporting an exclamation, we use the reporting verb exclaimed or cried out and use the word that to introduce the indirect speech. For example, direct speech, what a beautiful day. Indirect speech, she exclaimed that it was a beautiful day. Okay. Another point is that indirect speech with time and place references. When reporting speech, we sometimes need to change the time and place references to reflect the context of the indirect speech. For example, direct speech, I'm going to the store now. Indirect speech, she said she was going to the store then. Indirect speech with pronouns. When reporting speech, we may need to change the pronouns to reflect the context of the indirect speech. For example, direct speech, I love chocolate. Indirect speech, she said she loved chocolate. Next point is indirect speech with reported questions. When reporting questions, we need to change the word order to make it a statement. For example, direct speech, why did you leave early? Indirect speech, she asked why I had left early. Then indirect speech with reported statements. When reporting statements, we can use the word that to introduce indirect speech. For example, direct speech, I'm hungry. Indirect speech, she said that she was hungry. Next point is indirect speech with reported commands. When reporting commands, we use an appropriate reporting verb to reflect the tone of the original command. For example, direct speech, go to your room. Indirect speech, she ordered me to go to my room. Okay. So these are all about direct and indirect speech. I hope you understand. I have given you immense examples regarding direct and indirect speech. Practice makes perfect. Practice it and you will learn. And if you find this video useful, please subscribe to Tobin Sharan team.